This week on Quadriga, Merkel's victory. At what price? Angela Merkel is triumphant. Her Christian Democrats achieved an 8% surge to more than 40% of the vote. Merkel has taken her party back to a level of support not seen since the days of Helmut Kohl, and her position as its leader is undisputed. But the result was not quite good enough to allow the Conservatives to govern Germany on their own. So what price will Social Democrats or Greens demand to join a coalition? And what price might they end up paying for helping Merkel return for a third term? Most of Europe wants strong leadership from Germany in the crisis, but that's only possible if the government is stable. Your host this week, Melinda Crane.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. So what constitutes a stable government? And how stable will German policy be while we're waiting for a government to be formed? Those are some of the questions that we want to ask today with three people who've been following German politics very closely. Thilo Jung is a video blogger and journalist based here in Berlin. He's renowned for his YouTube interview series entitled Young and Naive: Politics for the Indifferent. Quentin Peel is chief correspondent for the Financial Times in Germany, as well as associate editor responsible for leader and feature writing, and he's reported for the FT from Africa, Brussels, and Moscow. And Alison Smale is a New York Times bureau chief here in Berlin. She has also served as deputy foreign editor of the Times, and until recently as executive editor at the International Herald Tribune. So welcome to all of you. Before we get started doing coalition arithmetic, I'd first like to get your take on the election results themselves. And starting with you, Quentin, perhaps, and the question of stable government for Germany. In fact, two of major British publications, not your own, but The Economist toward the right, The Guardian toward the left, they both actually endorsed Chancellor Merkel prior to the election, saying that Europe needs strong German leadership and she's the person to deliver it. So does this election result give them what they want?
Well, everybody seemed to want Merkel, to be absolutely honest. I don't think, the French wanted Merkel, everybody wanted her. And she won, but she didn't win, because she didn't quite win. 5 votes short of an absolute majority. So it's going to be a classic German compromise at the end, and not particularly stable, except for one thing, I think, the character of Frau Merkel. She is somebody who very methodically, very carefully forges consensus. And to that degree, I think Germany will be predictable. But I wish people had realized that Germany is going to be predictable because we're going to get more of the same, not some sudden change.
Okay, I want to debate that point in just a moment, but let me first ask Thilo Jung about the young vote in Germany. This is quite a resounding affirmation for Chancellor Merkel, a conservative. How much does that please young voters?
Well, I mean, apparently they like her. I mean, and they, I think in the majority they would have voted for her as well. They did vote for her. I don't know.
I thought it was very interesting the way she actually consciously mentioned young people and young voters at many campaign stops. When she came back from vacation, the first thing she did was an interview with a teen magazine, and she gave a history lesson up in a school in East Berlin on the anniversary of the building of the wall. And also, when she thanked everybody on Sunday night, she also specifically said, and thank you to the young people, and she had this Team Deutschland cheering away for her. And whilst, obviously, you met a lot of young people at her rallies who were engaged in the Young Christian Democrats and so on, if you think about it, anybody who's under 26 has actually only known her as Chancellor since they were able to vote and probably became sort of politically conscious. And everybody complains about Merkel not leaving a legacy, but I think what she wants to do is go after those people and hope that she can form them somewhat in her image.
What I wonder, Thilo Jung, is how conservative is she really? Do you think she is perceived by young people of your generation as a conservative?
Not at all. I think young people, I think could also think she's the leader of the Social Democratic Party. I mean, she could be anything, and that's one thing that's so great about her to young voters. Anything that they can project anything on her.
In fact, Alison Smale, that's one of the fascinating things about the Chancellor. Abroad, including by media like the New York Times, she's perceived as the neoliberal austerity queen, but here at home, she's taken her party and the country to the left.
Well, I think it's a question of dividing a little bit social issues here and social issues elsewhere. I mean, what Merkel has tried to do, I think, is exactly what most national leaders try to do, which is to create something that is in the interest of their country and that benefits their society. In her case, she has been able to move her party further into the center on many social issues. Abroad, what she's known for is this alleged hammering in of austerity, which at home is not understood that way at all. At home, it's understood as, you know, giving Miss Merkel and Wolfgang Schäuble the confidence to negotiate in Europe and make sure that Germany does help, does the solidarity bit, as she puts it, but does also say, you know, this is how the money should be spent, or this is what we want to happen, because otherwise she can't justify giving hard-earned taxpayer euros to people who are less organized than the Germans. That's the view, I think.
It's kind of like she refuses to prescribe the medicine that she prescribes to everybody else in Europe.
But I'm not sure that she does prescribe this medicine. I mean, this is really where I do disagree with that depiction. I think that what everybody is doing in Europe, there is a crisis. The euro was set up. It was not a fiscal union. It was a currency that was shared without giving policy powers. The markets called the countries on it, essentially. And now everybody is looking for ways to solve this dilemma. I don't think it's, you know, just nasty medicine. The problem is that some of the countries that are involved in the Eurozone have very different circumstances than other countries do.
The image of her in Greece is a complete caricature. I mean, it's nothing like the woman.
And yet we read that in some southern European countries, there was also general approval that she had been reelected, oddly enough. Quentin Peel, let's talk a bit about what prescriptions we might be seeing coming out of Germany in the coming months. One of the reasons that all of Europe was watching this election is because they were hoping that Germany might finally be ready to take action on important EU policy measures again. Things like the banking union have been more or less on hold the past 10 months. Now, it seems we need to wait quite a while for a new coalition government to be formed. What do you think will happen in that interim?
Well, I mean, we certainly could be talking about 2 months of negotiations. The last time it took 65 days. The longest ever, I think, was 73. That was back with Helmut Schmidt and Genscher. But so it could be a long time. Okay, but we've still got a government. This government will carry on in office. But really difficult decisions clearly are hostage to these negotiations.
So there's a bit of a lame duck phenomenon here?
I wrote an article today saying that I thought Wolfgang Schäuble would probably remain finance minister. That's the question they're all waiting to hear in Brussels, for example. Who's going to be the German finance minister? Who do we have to deal with? The truth is that actually German finance policy is highly technical and is run largely by the technocrats. So there's going to be continuity on that front. The one area that I see there could be a move, although we've been constantly disappointed, is to boost domestic growth in Germany by having a big investment program of some sort. If this could happen and Germany could start to grow a bit faster, everybody else would benefit. But we've been begging for that for years, and it's never quite happened.
And that surely doesn't happen until a coalition is in place. Just briefly, Alison Smale, your paper, the New York Times, predicted after the election that this meant a continuation of the hardline austerity policy. Now, that story was not written by you, but would you agree that this election result means we will see Germany continue to take that hardline policy, including in the interim period?
Well, I think what we will continue to see is Germany acting in its interest, but also, since it's made such, I mean, Germany's prosperity economically, its political value, is very much tied up with being involved in the project for more European unity. So it's very unlikely that you will see Germany abandon Europe's interests, but they will be defined, of course, through national eyes, as they are everywhere. If that means more austerity, I don't think it means more austerity. I think we've seen a definite change in rhetoric from Chancellor Merkel in the last few months. I think she is sympathetic to the plight of millions of unemployed South Europeans. I wonder if we will see a sort of a human reaching out, if you see what I mean, rather than expecting governments just to deliver money. You know, young people, how sympathetic are they between each other? The Austria has the lowest unemployment rate in Europe. Its youth is mostly employed. How worried or not are they by the plight of their peers in Greece or Spain or Portugal? And that, I think, is what Europe is really supposed to be about. It sounds very preachy and idealistic.
Well, and in fact, the German government, prior to the election, did institute some policies to support students from Southern Europe who come here to study or to work in internships. Thilo Jung, what's your take on it? Do you expect to see your country continue to take the same kind of line in Europe in the next couple of months while we're waiting for a coalition?
I think that there's going to be a shift, like a shift towards less austerity, more growth and all that. And I think due to, I mean, when we look back in the campaign, nobody talked about Europe. Nobody wanted to talk about Europe, especially Merkel and Schäuble. And I think it's because they knew that change is going to happen after the election. They have to change their policies, and they didn't want to talk to their voters about it, so they wouldn't get scared or something else. So I think there's a shift is coming up.
So let's talk about what kind of change might happen, because that depends very much, of course, on what kind of coalition does get formed. Interestingly enough, Angela Merkel has said she wants a stable government, but she also said on election night, maybe nobody's going to want to work together with us. And in fact, both possible coalition partners have been sounding rather reluctant the past few days. Let's find out why.
The Free Democrats have been members of more governments in post-war Germany than any other party. But their support has been declining for years, and after this election, they are out of the parliament altogether. In part, their failure is due to the overwhelming strength of Angela Merkel's conservatives in the coalition. The chancellor rarely allowed her junior partners to claim political credit for anything the government did. The same could happen to the Social Democrats if they decide to join Merkel in a so-called Grand Coalition. They shared in Merkel's first government from 2005, but the experience lost them support at the polls. This time around, the Social Democrats would want to retain control over at least some of their signature policies if they choose to become part of another Merkel-led government.
Alison Smale, is Angela Merkel like some kind of black widow spider who just chews up her junior coalition partners and spits them out?
I really don't think so. I mean, I think that looking at the film we've just seen, the FDP and the SPD also bear shares of responsibility for their own fate, and I suspect that they have rather more to do with their fate than Angela Merkel does. In the case of the Social Democrats, they were in the government between 2005 and 2009. They also internally went through 4 or 5 chairmen, I think, in a very quick succession, suggesting that there is a split in that party between those who accept the reforms broadly known as Agenda 2010, who agreed with the idea that the welfare state got a little bit less generous and that labor laws were reformed in a way that has proven very beneficial to Germany, and which Chancellor Merkel, on the right occasion, always acknowledges was partly the work of, at least partly the work of her social democratic predecessor, Gerhard Schröder. So they spent a lot of time kind of eating each other up, as well as being very reliable partners in the effective government that got Germany through the 2008 financial crisis. In the case of the Free Democrats, they had a record result in 2009, almost 15%, unheard of, and then they proved unable to do what they said their agenda was. They didn't really deliver on taxes for business people, and in the meantime also served up a collection of weaker and weaker leaders.
Unable or unwilling, many people in Germany would say. Quentin Peel, looking at that reluctance of both parties, both have been saying, SPD, for example, hey, we have to vote on this, we need our grassroots supporters to be in on the decision and so on, and the Greens also very shy. Is it possible we might see new elections in Germany?
God forbid. I don't think anybody wants new elections, and in fact, they wouldn't benefit from them. The only people who'd benefit from new elections are the two little parties that just didn't quite get in this time. So we might see the Free Democrats come back in because people don't want them out of Parliament, and we might well see the Eurosceptics come back in. So, hey, don't go down this route. Having said that, it's going to be a very painful process to get these opposition parties into negotiations. It's not because Merkel eats up her junior partners, it's just that being a junior partner is very difficult. And when you're so much the junior partner, because after all, she's almost got a majority on her own, you just don't have so much influence on the game. But it hasn't always been like that. And I talk to Social Democrats who think they ought to go in, and they say, remember 1969? Willy Brandt came out of a grand coalition as the junior partner and won the election. So it's not impossible.
Very good. So let's take the criteria that Angela Merkel herself has set out, namely a stable government, and let's take a little poll here amongst you. Thilo Jung, what would be the most stable coalition for Germany, given the circumstances?
I think the black-green coalition would be the best.
The black being the term that we use for the Christian Democrats.
Excuse me. The Christian Green coalition. But I also want to point out that Merkel could be dethroned. I mean, if there's a red-green coalition between Social Democrats, the Left Party, and Greens, we don't have to talk about Merkel. I mean, she's not alternativlos as it is.
But do you really think that's a possibility? The Social Democrats had said in blanket terms before the election, we will not enter a coalition with the Left Party. The Left Party, of course, being the party that is formed from a rump, the remainder of the Communist Party in Eastern Germany, together with left-wing Social Democrats who left that party. So a party at the moment that nobody wants to touch, but that could change, right?
I think so, and it's for surely going to change in the next 4 years. I don't know if a new coalition could form out of this Bundestag in the next 4 years, but I think it's important to point out that Merkel lost her own majority. Now that the Liberals are gone, she only has, the CDU could be the opposition party. I mean, it's always an important thing to point out.
Alison Smale, you get to give your vote now. What's the stable coalition for Germany?
Well, I mean, I think that's really up to Germans to decide, but probably it will be a grand coalition.
And what advantages would that have?
I mean, if indeed the mantra is stable government, probably it would be that. Underneath that sort of formation, however, I do think there would be quite a lot of realignment. I also do think, I mean, everybody outside Germany was saying we've got to wait for Germany to decide and then let's look at Europe. But of course, for Germans, and they were the ones who voted, this election is about Germany in the 21st century. And there, I think, will be more debate about social issues and what kind of society everybody wants going forward. Anybody you talk to before the election, they weren't saying we need to think about the euro or we need to worry about Greece. They were saying, what about kindergartens? What about schools? What about universities? What about rent controls? I mean, these are the issues that are perceived as important.
And social justice, a high priority for many voters, and indeed
for the Social Democrats. I mean, that was really their slogan. Yeah.
Well, apparently not a high priority because they voted for the CDU, which.
Well, 25.6% did vote for the SPD.
And also, Angela Merkel presented her party very much in the film that rolled at rallies and so on.
Well,
I want a just society.
Every
I'm
time
about
the
helping
opposition
the
came
poor.
up with a good social policy,
See,
she
she
grabbed
took
it.
it, exactly.
So, she was quite
Merkel's
clever
triangulation tactics.
Yeah, but I want to come.
Yes, please.
Melanie, I want to give you
haven't
my
yet
stability
said that.
answer.
I'm waiting for
And
it.
the first honest answer is, of course, we as journalists don't want a stable government.
No.
We want a fun government to write about. So actually, red, red, green would be wonderful because it would be totally unpredictable, and black, green would be also. So the Greens and the Christian Democrats, very interesting because we've never seen it before. Would it be stable? Well, the trouble is that the Greens they're pretty well evenly divided between their realistic right wing and their fundamentalist left wing. And the fundamentalist left wing would hate it and the realistic right wing would be fine.
But some of those fundamentalists have gotten out of the way now. For instance, the man who led the party's election campaign, which was a decidedly left-leaning campaign, he has resigned. So we might see the Greens more open to a coalition with the Christian Democrats?
That's my suspicion. And of course, Angela Merkel, once environment minister, there's a very strong group in the Christian Democrats who've always wanted to do a deal with the Greens. But don't get anything wrong, a Christian Democrat Green government could be a very conservative German government, a sort of no change, let's go back to the Middle Ages government, no growth, for example. I mean, we don't want growth.
Well, I mean, the only non-conservative thing would be the Energiewende, because then the Greens would push that.
Let's remind our viewers what that is. That's the transformation of the German energy system away from nuclear and fossil fuels toward renewables. It needs fixing. There are big problems with the Energiewende. Everybody knows that the laws will have to be changed in order to basically keep German industry afloat and keep German consumers from rising up in rebellion because their electricity prices are going up. Thilo Jung, which coalition would be best equipped to make the Energiewende work?
Well, I think any coalition without the CDU, because the CDU is the most business-friendly one. And when you look at the Energiewende so far, the Liberals and the Christian Democrats, they ensured that big business and the oligarchs.
I think I would really push back against that because it is Angela Merkel who's leading the Christian Democrats. She, as far as we know, does not have a challenger inside that party. And yes, the business interests need to be represented. Therefore, she's probably the only leader who can actually push it through.
What would you expect? Which of the two possible coalitions would be better at reforming that very key part of her policy? Because, of course, that's one of the things she's going to be judged on in the history books, isn't it? Whether she made this huge experiment work.
Yes, I'll hedge my bets on that one. I just think that, I mean, what we did see during the campaign was an acknowledgement from Merkel herself that this was one of the big pieces of business that needs to be tackled pretty thoroughly. What I think will be interesting, no matter how exactly the coalition is formed, is whether energy is made a separate ministry. If it would be, then maybe that's an indication that there's going to be a real kind of effort. And we know from experience that German society is capable of setting itself a goal and moving towards it.
I think German business wants a grand coalition because they think that will fix the Energiewende better in their direction, that the Greens will be very fundamentalist and will not want to slow anything down, whereas the business community, I mean, they're looking at an energy price now in America 60% below the German energy price. So it's no longer a question of not being competitive because of wages, it's a question of not being competitive because of energy prices. So it's a big challenge.
Which Merkel herself has really, really stressed.
And of course, the Social Democrats, also a party that is very interested in keeping manufacturing jobs in Germany. So possibly also likely to slow the Energiewende down if the Social Democrats become the junior coalition partner, Thilo Jung?
I don't know that. I mean, I was just going to say the great thing for the Energiewende is that the FDP is out of a possible coalition because they slowed the whole Energiewende down as much as possible. So any new coalition partner is better for the Energiewende.
The Social Democrats have very strong bases in places like North Rhine-Westphalia with a lot of old energy. Not just coal, but we're talking brown coal, the really dirty stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at some of the other policy areas that will be very, very important going forward. Alison Smale, EU politics. We've just touched on it briefly, but that was the short-term view. Longer term, what would you expect from a grand coalition with the Social Democrats? They, of course, claimed during the election campaign that they would do things differently, but until now they've voted with Chancellor Merkel and the Christian Democrats on every single EU law that was up for approval.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think Per Steinbrück, the Social Democrats' main candidate, ever really quite defined what he meant by talk of a Marshall Plan-like kind of aid for Southern Europe. And I'm not sure that that is something that the majority of Germans would go for. I mean, invoking the help that was given to Germany after World War II as a reason to help those who need money now is an effective argument. But I don't think it's something that sort of gives politicians here a license to loosen the purse strings, in part because precisely the challenges that we were just discussing, how do you keep manufacturing ahead of the game here? Can you do the energy thing at all and stay competitive? And I think that, you know, so long as Merkel is Chancellor, one of the things that she worries about most is global competition. And she doesn't speak about it very much because she knows it tends to go over the head of her listeners, but she always finds a way. She loves to cite this statistic about Europe being 7% of the world's population, producing 25% of the world's GDP, and spending 50% of the amount that the world spends on welfare.
She said it in every single speech.
Exactly.
And we heard it.
Yeah. Actually, there was one time I didn't hear it.
If you look at the European policies that are coming up in the next couple of years, I think it's crucial for her to have the Social Democrats on her side, because they could change the constitution with their majority. I mean, they would have a 2/3 of a majority in the Bundestag, so I think that's the crucial point for Merkel to go with the Social Democrats.
Very interesting point. And there's another aspect to the mechanics of democracy as well, isn't there? Germany has a two-house parliament, and in the second chamber, the states have a big Social Democrat majority. So does that also mean that a grand coalition might be more able to be effective in the sense of getting laws through?
I think so. I mean, and mainly because of the whole European thing. I mean, if you look at the banking union, and especially Merkel was talking about making Europe more politically united, there's change coming up, especially in the constitution, and maybe even a new constitution for Europe. So,
But Quentin Peel, Merkel herself has given very conflicting signals in the past 4 years about where she wants Europe to go. During the first 2 years of her term, it sounded like more integration, more of a federal states of Europe. The last 2 years, it was sounding like she was wanting to give competencies back to the nation states. What's going on here? What do you think we could expect? And perhaps also from those two different coalitions, how might they influence her, if at all?
Okay. Well, I think that the first thing is, let's get clear, Merkel's priority in Europe is stabilize the euro. Second priority, stabilize the euro. Third priority, stabilize the euro. And after that, we're thinking. So anything that helps stabilize the euro, she'll do. And that has meant quite a lot of what we'd call intergovernmental fixes, rather than do it through the Brussels institutions. And there's a classic one looming right now on banking union. The Commission wants to be in charge of a big fund to bail out or close down bad banks, and Germany wants to have its veto on its money. So there's a tension there. Now, I don't think that goes all the way. We are not seeing Frau Merkel suddenly become a Brit on Europe. The British are the real,
Brits.
give us the power back. And that's not the way she's going. So she's pragmatic about this. Now, she's more pragmatic than the old-fashioned German passion for European integration. But having said that, she is riding this very clever thing. Pro-European, defend the national interest, both at once.
In my impression, just one brief question to Alison, in my impression, that is exactly why she got such a resounding victory, that the German voters do like that policy of small steps, of looking at the purse and saying, being very careful about where German tax euros are going, and at the same time, a commitment to Europe within limits.
Yes, she did exactly what she was required to do, which was to say, my hands are safe. Here's the gesture. And she appealed to both sides of Germans' tendency to, yes, they see very clearly that being in Europe has helped enormously in the post-World War II recovery. And at the same time, she's not a great speaker, but she has a very skilled way of using German phrases and language that goes straight to the sort of tendency of her audience and her voters to say, let's just keep things on an even keel here. We don't need anybody really sort of pushing this way or that. And they feel comfortable with her.
And I think she is very much pro-European. And you mentioned that the last 2 years she was more quiet about it, more concerned about for the national state. And I think that was part of it because she was in campaign mode. She didn't want to turn off voters, and I think now. She also got so much votes so many votes because the Germans saw what's happening in Europe, that South Europe is crumbling down, unemployment everywhere. Even France is starting to look bad. So the Germans tried to hold on to what they have. We were talking about stability. They wanted to keep what's there right now. So it's
interestingly enough. There were a few moments in the election night where we actually thought that this anti-Euro party might get into the parliament. For a brief period, it was looking very, very close to that 5% threshold that they would need in order to get in. Do you think there is a real trend toward skepticism about the EU and being a member of the Euro, or would you say that this is a party that will sort of disappear over time?
I don't think it's going to disappear, especially when you look at the upcoming European elections in May. I think they're going to be stronger than in the Bundestag elections, because if Merkel and Schäuble are going to stay as undecided towards the European policies as they are right now, the AfD is going to be a big winner in the European elections.
Of course, standing for Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany. That's the name of this little party that did not yet get in. How much of a threat is it out there, outside of Parliament, but obviously still in the public eye?
I think it's probably a very healthy development for Germany because it brings the debate into the open. At the same time, I don't see them really accumulating seats. They've got overwhelmingly male economics professors, law professors, and a bit nationalist. Funnily enough, they picked up most of their votes in Eastern Germany, and not necessarily all from the bourgeoisie. It was they tapped into a degree of German insecurity, which I think did help them. Having said that, I think it's very healthy that this debate is out there, because up to now, it's been a bit suppressed in Germany. But hey, 4.7% or whatever they got, 4.7%. Compare that with the Netherlands or Finland or other countries with Eurosceptic movements, it's tiny.
And the European skepticism, especially in Germany, is that there's a cause for that. The Germans were never asked to approve that EU membership. They were never asked to join the euro. So that's what I always hear. Germans.
On the other hand, exit polls on the night of the election showed that a resounding majority of Germans believe in the euro, want to stay in the EU, and also, interestingly enough, believe that the worst of the crisis is still to come. Quite interesting. Alison Smell, I'd like to move on to a few other issues because we're slowly running out of time, and there are a couple more important aspects of Germany's position in the world that I'd like to talk about. This one I think we can do quickly. German foreign policy. Will it change with a new government depending on the coalition?
I don't think so, in the sense that what most people want answered is whether Germany is going to take a more assertive and leading role in foreign affairs, develop a really coherent strategic policy, defense policy. And I think the answer to that is no. I think Germans see themselves within Europe the last 4 or 8 years, and in fact, the decades since 1945, give their answer to that question. And I would like to make one point, which is, even if you had somebody who had the ambition to make Germany the leading force, and we're going to come out and we are the leaders and so on. There are so many constraints within this system. The Allies built this system after 1945 precisely to diffuse power and to create and to have an election law that most likely yields coalition government and not majority government. And so you actually don't have the mechanisms necessarily to be able to put this together. It would be a very, very tall order. That having been said, clearly, Germany is Europe's economic powerhouse. This is where the Americans are going to look principally in trying to forge a new transatlantic trade agreement, which is being touted by some as the equivalent of the new NATO. I'm not quite sure that I believe that. But obviously, the idea is to try and create an 800 million strong trading zone that will be able to impose its Western standards on manufacturing and on future developments, and which is viewed as a bulwark against the rise of China and India and other countries. I think that's where you'll see Germany taking a leading role.
Unless anybody wants to disagree on the foreign policy point. Anybody think Germany's going to start punching above its weight now?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I was going to say it would be nice to have a foreign policy for once. I mean, the last 4 years...
The only time Germany's ever had a foreign policy, or a more assertive, has been red-green.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yes. It's never been the Conservatives.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then let's move on to a final area, very, very important area if we look at some of the basic statistics on where Germany is going economically. The OECD says the prospects for growth in Germany in the next 50 years are as low as any member country that it has, down there with Lithuania, I think it is. Quentin Peel, there are some big areas where investment is needed, where reform is needed, whether it's infrastructure, education, there's rising economic inequality. Which government can best fix that, if any?
It's certainly the big challenge. I mean, getting German growth off the bottom would be good for Germany. I suspect a grand coalition, because I don't think the Greens are very keen on economic growth as a target, because it consumes resources and so on. Whereas the Greens want more wages for their people, they want more spending in the Länder, in the states they control. So, because the roads are in a bad state, the canals are in a bad state, the railways, very un-German, but actually they've been allowed to slip back. So getting that going is very important.
I mean, I talked to Jürgen Trittin, he was the main candidate for the Greens, and I asked him, well, I mean, it's never been cheaper to borrow money for Germany right now. Why don't you borrow hundreds of billions to invest and get the infrastructure intact? And he was like, well, no, that is bad. So I kind of disagree with you that the Greens would not be a great coalition partner in these terms.
They don't want to borrow money to go for growth. That's the point I'm making. They don't want to go for growth.
And I asked him, well, why don't you borrow money? It's as cheap as ever.
And he said no.
And he said no. So it was.
I mean, I think all the infrastructure you've talked about is clearly in need of a boost, and the internet. Excuse me.
Yeah.
The basic tool of the age.
Is very slow in Germany.
Yes, I mean, you know, one of the points of Per Steinbrück's stump speech was it's in some places
faster in Romania.
Faster in Romania, yeah.
Alison Smell, is this why we're suddenly hearing the finance minister and some other leading Christian Democrats talking about maybe raising taxes after all? Oddly enough, there weren't going to be any tax hikes, and now suddenly they're looking at possible coalitions with two parties that did want to raise taxes, and what do you know? Wolfgang Schäuble thinks it might not be a bad idea.
Wolfgang Schäuble doesn't say that. Wolfgang Schäuble didn't rule it out, which is Wolfgang Schäuble being part of the Christian Democrats on their search for a bride, you know, and you've got to have something attractive to offer. The only way that you could perhaps attract, say, the Social Democrats is more or less to say perhaps there'll be a little bit more money available, and then the Social Democrats presumably would have to settle on which it is of their social issues that they would then walk away from a coalition agreement saying, you see, we realize this agenda. And I think there's also some people within the Christian Democratic camp who wouldn't be unhappy to see money available for certain things that they want to get done. We know that family, for instance,
tax rises per se. They wanted the money to do something.
Yes.
If you could persuade them that you can do that without tax rises, surely there's a deal.
Also, if it is, as postulated by some people, a tax on the top earning, it's an income tax on the top earning people, it just doesn't affect that many people.
Thilo Jung, in many countries, the idea that a government gets elected and immediately starts talking about raising taxes would be extremely unappealing to the voters. Well, how do Germans see it? Are they going to go along with such a move?
Well, I mean, I think they will go along, but they always punish those who talk about it before the elections. I mean, look at the Greens. They got badly injured in the elections, and look back at in 2005, Merkel ran on her platform was we raise taxes, we raise the Mehrwertsteuer,
the value-added tax.
Yeah, the value-added tax 3%, and she almost barely made it to become chancellor. So it's always a bad idea to talk about taxes in the election. But afterwards, it's all.
Afterwards, it's all part of the whole mentality that I think she taps into very well. People are concerned about careful husbanding of resources here. Let's not spend more than we earn, and let's save if we can. Of course, everybody does spend more than they earn, but the language is important.
Let's keep pretending.
Quentin Peel, you mentioned it before. 65 days, the last grand coalition. How long do you think we're looking at until this government gets formed?
Well, not before December, maybe mid-December. We might have a government by Christmas.
Quite a while to wait. Interesting for the media in that time. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks to all of you out there for tuning in. See you soon.